Hello and welcome to Skeindeer Knits. My name is Ellie and I am a Norwegian living and knitting in London. You can find me on Instagram as Skeindeer and on Ravelry as a designer called Skeindeer Knits. And that is also the name of my Ravelry group. It's called Skeindeer Knits as well, and it's the best place to get in touch and get pattern support, take part in knit-alongs, potential giveaways and the community in general. And yeah, welcome to this knitting podcast slash talk show slash hour of me showing you what I knit, what I do. So if you're new here, that is essentially what's going on here. I just talk about knitting for an hour. It's great. And to returning viewers, welcome back. Thank you so much for coming back. I feel like I've been on a very long break. I managed to record fairly shortly after returning from Edinburgh Yarn Festival, but then I got ill. And yeah, I'm gonna edit out a lot of coughing in this video. My voice is going to sound very croaky. It probably already does. If you're someone who hates the sound of husky cold voices, maybe this video isn't for you. Don't say I didn't warn you, but hey, if you like the husky voice, then that's oh, we're only on top of the tip of the iceberg right now. The more I use my voice, the worse it gets. So yeah, it feels like I've been on a fairly long break, because even though my episode really just came out about a week ago or so, I had recorded it like a week before that again. So it's been a long time for me. And yet I have very little to talk about, it feels. My show notes are very short. But anyway, I have a couple of admin things to go through and then we'll jump straight into the knitting. So I am running 2 knit-alongs, but I think we're gonna broaden that out to 3 at the end of this episode. The first knit-along is the year-long knit-along of 2019, where we aim to make 6 pairs of colourwork mittens for the duration of 2019. More rules and stuff and things about that is in my Ravelry group in the relevant thread. And the other knit-along is the second language cal. Now that was supposed to end at the end of March, but because I have been ill, I have still not actually wrapped it up at the time when I'm recording this. I hope that by the time this episode goes out, I have closed the threads, drawn prices, things like that. But for anyone who's wondering what happened with that cal, I got ill. It was a cold / flu. It's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, my head feels like there's a magnet in it and there's a magnet in my pillow and I can only lay down. It was kind of like that, you know. We've all been there. It's nothing, yeah, it just doesn't mean you can do much admin really. So yeah, nobody wants to hear about me being sick. I just thought I would explain to those of you having taken part in the knit-along for 2 months wondering what was that. So yeah, the third knit-along that I think we may just kick off in this episode is a cal for the kosekofte. The kosekofte is under here somewhere. This is my layer of laptop cover that my aunt made me, lots of garments that I've made and stuff. I just, where I put them when I don't wear them. Yeah. Kosekofte is a cardigan that I have designed, lots of pictures, design and stuff on Ravelry, and I want to have a knit-along for it. I did suggest in the last episode to do a general Skeindeer Knits garments cal, and whilst I think that's a great idea, I'm not sure now is the best time, and it also seems really unfair to put kosekofte on the same level of thing, the same plate as the other garments, because kosekofte is quite frankly in a league of its own. It's a lot more challenges involved, it's a lot more time consuming. It's not really a very fair contest. Not that a knit-along is ever a contest, it's just a knit-along, but it doesn't seem like it's fair. So I'm not gonna say that I'm never gonna do a Skeindeer Knits garments cal, but I think for the time being I wonder if the best thing is to just do a kosekofte cal. And yeah, so the kickoff date will be at the launch date of the pattern, so that was back in March. So if you cast on as soon as it came out, you are still eligible to take part. I wouldn't want you to have cast on too early, that would be ridiculous. And I have not decided on a deadline. I am really wanting you guys to finish, so for now I think we're just gonna run it. Let's say it's gonna happen for 3 months time. Let's just say that, and then if by 3 months I see that, oh, April, May, June, a bit of July is not enough, let's keep it up until the end of July, like just in time for the mitten club to start in August, for instance, so that they don't overlap. We can do something like that. We'll see how it goes, play it by ear. Just I want to make sure that people have time to finish. I don't want anyone to not join because they think they don't have time or that they can't finish in time, things like that. So I want you to have time to like get the yarn you need and stuff as well. So I hope that's something everyone who wants to knit this cardigan will get on board with. There will of course be prizes, because that's kind of one of the fun side gigs with a Cal, that there are prize draws in the end, although I hope the cardigan itself is the motivation. I really like it. I worn it a lot. It's gotten a bit warmer in London lately, so I'm wearing my lighter cardigans lately, but I wouldn't mind if it got a bit colder again, you know. Just looking sad out the window. It looks really cold today. It's very nice and cloudy. Lovely podcast recording day, but not very cold. It's deceptively dark, but not cold. So I guess that's it for admin then. 3 knit-alongs are happening currently. That seems like a number I'm quite comfortable with. 2 seemed very little, right? I mean, I am known to run, quite frankly, too many knit-alongs at the same time, and why not continue on with that tradition? So yeah, I have linked to the cardigan pattern down below in case you want to check it out on Ravelry. And I thought now it's time to talk about my finished objects for the week, because I have actually finished 2 things, and they're both sweaters. Shall we start with the one that got accidentally felted in the washing machine, shall we? Yeah. So, you know the Wood Warrior sweater, at the front cover sweater of the latest Pom-Pom magazine for the spring 2019? I knitted that. I was like, yeah, I can have 2 garments done by the next episode at least. Wouldn't that be amazing? 2 garments, my goodness. Let's keep knitting and knitting. And I was super monogamous, which is why I have so few projects to talk about here today. And I kept knitting, got the arms done, got the body done. It was done. It was quick. I mean, it is worsted weight, but it's also a lot of stitches. It's very oversized. And it was a bit late. I was quite ill, but I decided I will chuck it in the wash to just soften it up a little bit. I have time to dry it before recording, so that's fine. And I know how to wash things in the washing machine. I am very confident with washing non-superwash in the washing machine. You just put it, we have like this analog wheel that changes which cycle you're using, so you just turn it to 4, which is delicate. Make sure it's at 30 degrees Celsius or below, and either no or full spin cycle. If it's somewhere in between, it would felt. I had done all of this except, you know, that first, the program wheel that puts it on delicates. Because it's analog, if you're like looking at it from a bit of an odd angle, having it set to 3 could also look like it's set on 4, you know, delicates. 3 is not delicates, turns out. And I was walking past the machine like shortly after I switched it on, and I was like, that sweater is being tossed around an awful lot. I don't think it should do that. It shouldn't do that on delicates. That will felt it. So I switched it off and turned the wheel to delicates and let it do the delicates thing, and whatever felting would have happened already. Delicates would have just done what I always intended. So after I'd washed it on delicates, it was a moment of truth. And it had felted during that first cycle. But it's not a disaster, okay? It's not broken. I mean, it's clearly felted. I'm going to show you just the sleeve. Very little stitch definition left here. This is the rib, right? You can see just how, and now it's blurry. Yeah, clearly felted. Very thick fabric now, but it's totally wearable actually. So this is the whole thing. You can see the stitch definition for the kind of plant garter thing down the raglan is quite vague now, but you can still wear it. It's fine. I mean, it's not fine. It's not how I intended it to be. If I could choose, I wouldn't have had it this way, but it's okay, right? I'm gonna give it to my friend later today. We're gonna meet up for dinner. She works in central London and she's moving soon. So she's gonna have a jumper and I'm gonna give it to her, and she better like it even though it's felted. But this thing was huge by the time I finished it, and right now it's actually a pretty good size. Like, it didn't actually shrink much. The fabric felted, yes, but I don't think it shrunk a whole lot. I would say the sleeves felted more and shrunk more. And overall it's actually a more, I would say, wearable size. It's stiffer, right? But I also know my friend Christy, she loves the firm knit fabric, and the fact that I used custom woolen mills from Canada that I bought at Wet Coast Wools in Vancouver when I was there at the end of 2017. It is a very thick worsted. Sometimes it looks even chunky. So when I knitted that on the 18 stitch gauge, it was already so dense that I think it would have been quite hard to felt it to a smaller size, because there's not really a lot to go on to make it even denser. So that was lucky too. As far as the pattern goes, I was quite disappointed that I didn't have any neck shaping, so it's exactly the same front and back up here. I knew that when I cast on, so you know, I just decided to follow the pattern. I could have put in short rows if I wanted to, but I thought, it's a turtleneck, does it really matter? And then I decided I didn't want to do the turtleneck because I didn't realize I was short on yarn. And this is how much yarn I had left. This little squishy ball. It's not a lot. So that was a good call, I think. I say it's the same front and back. That's not entirely true. At the bottom, it is not. At the bottom, the back hem it's longer. So you know what's the back based on that. So I'm going to give you a close up here, because I think here is the best way to see how it's felted. You can see on the garter seam here just how there's just less stitch definition than there was before I gave it a wash. Oh well, oh well. So I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not beating myself up over too much, because I know what I'm doing with the machine. I know which program that works. I've tested it on lesser garments before. I know how it's done, but I put it on the wrong cycle. Yeah, so that's just, you know, you gotta like squat, squint one eye, look at the wheel and be sure it's dialed to 4, not 3, not 5. Yeah, why couldn't they have put the delicate cycle like next to the woolen cycle, so that if you get it wrong it's not going to be a disaster? That would have been something. Hey, anyway, let's not blame the manufacturer of the washing machine. This is entirely on me. I could have just looked more carefully. Yeah, but I don't want anyone to be scared of washing something in the washing machine. If you get the right program, it should be fine. Gosh, look how felt it is here. You can hardly see the pattern. But yeah, don't be scared of washing in the washing machine, because you just need to make sure you put on the right program. Yeah, you learn from your mistakes, and something else that's probably very wise and that we can all take home and learn from. Oh dear. Anyway, I like it overall. It's a really good fit on me. It's actually a really nice color on me too. But in the end, I did intend it for my friend Christy, so I'm gonna give it to her today. And hey, if she doesn't like it, I do. But I think, yeah, it will go to a good home. For anyone knitting this, you may wonder what is going on with the neckline. It looks awfully tight, because when you knit it, you are only knitting from the stockinette. You knit down and then you pick up for the turtleneck later, and I obviously didn't do a turtleneck, but I did the rib anyway, just a lot shorter. And this looks very snug, but the neckline before you pick up anything for the rib is really, really open, like it's all the way here. And how have I done this? Is the felting? No, it's got nothing to do with that. Forget the washing machine thing. I don't know. I picked up as many stitches as it said. I did a couple of decreases like the pattern says to make it, I think, like 100 stitches or something. And it just really brought it together. I was amazed. I thought this was going to be a way open neckline, and I didn't really want that. And turns out deceptively open necklines aren't as open in the end. And I'm very glad to have learned that. I also learned it on the next garment I'm going to tell you about. Yeah, so I'm going to try to be less scared of wide open necklines or raglans that don't have the rib on yet, because turns out I could gather it up quite a bit when I did this. And there's also how I bound off. I actually found in the end that the best way to bind off was to, I don't know if you know the stretchy bind off, where you knit one stitch, knit the next stitch, knit those 2 stitches together through the back loop, knit the next stitch, knit that stitch together through the back loop with the other one. And if you have rib, you will purl the pearls and knit the knits and then knit them together through the back loop. I did that. I always do that. I love that method, but it became quite wide. So I found that what I could do instead was, okay, I would do it as I always do with the knit stitches, but for the pairs of purl stitches and the 2x2 rib, I actually purl 2 together and then knit them together through the back loop with the previous knit stitch, and that made it just come together really nicely. So I'm not sure it actually shows, but yeah, for the purl stitches these are purled together, but the knit stitches are not in the bind off. It just really had a very nice effect, and I think I'm going to do that on this too. So whilst this is my second finished project, so I'm just gonna wrap this up first. This is Woodwardia by Lydia Gluck from the latest Pom Pom magazine. It is finished, maybe not as exactly as intended, but it's fine, and yeah. Second finished object, I am wearing it. Look at that. This is the Ducot sweater by Kate Davies that I cast on in November, and it was just going to be a very quick and cheeky knit, right? Quick cast on, just a simple raglan. Should be done in a minute. I finished it in April. What can I say? These things happen a lot. I think a certain type of designs or garment or gauge or whatever is going to be quicker, and I always find myself just spending an awful lot of time on it. Even the Woodwardia was not as quick as I thought when I cast on. Yeah. So yeah, I started off talking about the neckline. You can see how it's sort of, it seems like there are more stitches than it needs to be. So I think I'm going to go back 2 rounds, the bind off on the previous round, and do the same thing that I did there. Purl together the purl stitches and knit the knit stitches. So the knit stitches are slipped every other round, and the purl stitches are, well, they're purled. And it's a 1x2 rib rather than that 2x2. I still think it will be fine. This just doesn't look nice, you know. There's something funny going on here, and it might be my fault because I did knit the rib a couple of rounds longer than the pattern said, because again, I thought before I'd picked up for the neckline that the neck opening was super wide and I had to knit longer to make up for it. But that was not the case at all. I really need to just trust that patterns, that necklines will really come together when you do the pickup and all that stuff. Yeah. So what else do I have to say? The cuffs took ages. They're really long, and they have this slip stitch rib on both of them. I think lots of you have probably knit the weekender, which I'll get to in a bit, spoiler. And there's a slip stitch going along the front, and it almost is as though it comes on the outside of the other purl stitches, and it's almost like a double knit effect. And that's essentially what this rib does as well. So you don't even go down in needle size for the rib, because all the knit stitches are kind of on the outside, and the stitch count that matters in the end is just the purl stitches, but you do it inside out if you want to, and that means that basically you are essentially going down in measurements for the rib. It does become a snug rib in the end. Really clever. I like that so much. So it's a really nice look. I thought about skipping on the slip stitch rib, the so-called Ducot rib, altogether, because I thought, oh, slip stitches, I don't like it. It takes so much longer, I don't want to. But I did it on the neckline at first, and I really liked it, and then I did it at the bottom hem, and also it's just really nice. So I'm just like holding it up. It's clearly cropped. I'm trying to show you the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, this fit is just so me. It's a little bit bigger than I usually prefer them, but I knew that going into this, that it's supposed to be quite, you know, positive easy. Yeah. It clearly needs a soak. I have not given this a wash or anything. Not because I was traumatized by the whole washing machine incident, but because I bound it off last night and I wanted to wear it today for you guys. So yeah, so you may be able to see that there's a line here. This was when I had the, goodness me, that got really dark. So you can see the line here. That's when I had the thread in on the sleeve, and I picked it up and knit it down, but I kept the thread in so I could easily measure from where the sleeves were knitted and down. Just makes it a lot easier than having to find the underarm point and stuff. But it does mean it needs the block to kind of make that little pattern go out. What is it with this camera making things darker when it's showing something even darker on screen? That's just the dumbest thing. Sorry camera, I love you. Anyway, I'm not going mad on purpose. I don't know what else to say. It's a really nice and warm sweater. This is just DK, but it feels a lot thicker, and I'm not sure why, because when I look at the strands, they're not. But when I see what fabric I got from what is a pretty common DK gauge, 22 stitches to 4 inches. 4 inches. Yeah, 4 inches and 10 centimeters. Or, goodness me, my brain. I haven't talked to a lot of people the past week. I've been so ill. But yeah, given the gauge and everything, I would have almost guessed that this was a thicker yarn, that it was more like a worsted, but it is truly DK. It's a recycled DK yarn that I was given from Hobium Yarns in Turkey. They're an online web shop, and they just gave me a pile of yarn, and I thought, oh, okay, I should probably knit up some of that. And turns out I really like this recycled yarn. I know it sounds a bit weird coming from me who got this whole thing for free, but it is a really low price point, and I kind of am already thinking about what other things I could knit in this yarn. I do have another sweater quantity laying around, but it would be nice to make something more in this exact color, because I love the color and the yarn. It feels really nice. It's very soft for non-superwash, and for anything really. Yeah, I really like it. It's quite tweedy. If I can just give you another close-up here. You can see it's got sort of, it's not your usual tweed either. It's just got little sort of white nups in it. And also sort of dust and hair and whatever that's just been catching since I've been knitting on it. But yeah, like I said, have another sweater quantity in a more bright red. I say sweater quantity, they're 10 skeins. It does make it half a kilo, but really it does just make it 1,000 meters. It's a bit shorter for a sweater my size, because the sweater quantity is a relative term depending on who is going to receive the sweater and wear it. So I might come up with excuses to get some more of this stuff, because I do really like it despite it being very warm right now. But yeah, it's been knitted over quite a long period of time, as many of my projects often are, so I don't know what I can say for the whole process. I have enjoyed it. It was a very good and clear pattern. I have really liked using the yarn, although I will say that this sort of recycled yarn, it's quite rigid. I wouldn't say it's a very bouncy yarn, so you may find it a little bit tough to work with and not as quick and efficient as, say, a superwash yarn is. But that's often the trade-off between a non-superwash and superwash. As much as I prefer non-superwash, I sometimes find that it's smoother to knit with the yarns that I prefer the least, such as some superwash yarns and alpaca and stuff like that. It's just really unfair that the more I like certain yarns, the harder I find them to knit with. But so yeah, that's probably the reason it wasn't as quick as I thought it would be, because it just takes a bit more actual force. But I have been made aware of lately that I have a very good knitting posture. Like, my posture in general is awful, like it's exceptionally bad, but the knitting part of it is pretty good, because I always keep my sound like I'm really bragging now, but I always keep my upper arms next to my body all the way down to the elbows. Like, my elbows are resting on my body. The only things that are extended are my lower arms, and they are really just resting on my body as well. So I'm just kind of doing this. So this is my knitting, right? It's very relaxed. It's not up here. My arms are not out. It's all very, there's very little force that goes into my actual hand movements. And I don't even like strain my finger that's holding the yarn continental style. It's very much relaxed behind my work. So altogether, I think that is how I can knit as much as I do without getting repetitive strain injury, which is a miracle that I don't have yet, because all I do is knit and type. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. I'm glad that there's one subcategory of posture that I got right in my life. So because I have bound off the other 2 projects for this week that I've been working on this week, there's really only one work in progress to talk about in this week's episode, and it's living in my Plystre project bag that came with my Plystre backpack. And yeah, I have hinted as to what it is, and yes, I have caved in to the bandwagon because I saw Amy's Weekender and I decided to make one that is identical, despite it is one size up, because I want lots of ease. And yeah, this is the Weekender. It is knit with whole super soft held double. It is the colors slate grey, I think, and graphite. I wound them off from my cones. I think I wound off just over 200 grams of each color, so the whole thing should weigh like 400 grams, which is not bad for an oversized worsted sweater. So far it's really light. The rib is folding up a little bit, which is annoying, but I think it will block out. It usually does. I did go ahead and use the tubular cast on, which looks really nice for the front. That was the last thing I did. Not as nice on the back, which was the first one I did. Again, we hope this will block out, but it's not very nice. It's not very even. It's a little bit too large, actually. Though I really appreciate that Andrea Mowry wrote in the pattern that you should use a smaller needle size for the actual tubular cast on and the setup, and then you go up to the rib needle size after that, and then you go up to the stockinette or reverse stockinette needle size. Really glad, because my tubular cast ons have in the past flared quite a bit, and it should be obvious that that was the solution. And even when I've done that, it still seems to flare a little bit. So it's good practice, actually, to cast on small needles. It is a bit goes against my intuition to do the cast on smaller needles, because usually a lot of people will actually find that they need larger needles for a cast on. I don't, but it's not uncommon. Goodness me, my voice. Send help. So I don't have much to say. It's just been a very good social knit. Like I said, it's knit inside out, so this is really what it looks like from the inside. Yes, it looks see-through right now because that's whole super soft. It is packed full of spinning oil, so it's quite, it kind of condenses it. It looks really fine, and then when you wash it up, the yarn gets a little bit more playing room and it blooms, as they say. It kind of, yeah, flowers. It's just grows and fills in the gaps. It's still probably going to be semi see-through, but not like this. I'll probably be wearing a tank top underneath, but it's not going to be, you know, don't worry, I have made lots of things in wholes, and like I made my fern and feather in whole super soft held double. I love that. Oh my god, I love that. I think I love whole super soft held double more than actual single. For single held super soft yarns, I think I actually prefer JC Rennie to whole super soft, but holding it double just makes it really nice and gives it a bit more, makes it a bit full. Wholes is very fine, so it's nice when it gets a bit fuller. I hope that made sense. But look at this color. I am so glad that Amy chose to swatch with the different greys of whole super soft, which we both have in our stashes, so that I didn't have to do that, and I can just go, okay, you did that, I like that, I will do that, and save myself a lot of trouble. So so essentially, if you want to know what this looks like, you don't really have to watch this podcast anymore. You can just jump over to the Stranded podcast by Amy and just see what it will look like finished, because I'm just doing the exact same thing. Bye bye originality. Sometimes you just see someone do something in a really great way, like this and the magnolia, and you just want to do the same thing. Yeah, it's just for me, so you know, I don't see any problems with it. But I really like it. I think, yeah, the Weekender is really nice. I have really enjoyed seeing Andrea Mowry kind of going back a bit to her pre-fade era, where she made a lot of stuff that was a lot more up my alley and the designs that I really love the aesthetics of. And she's not just gone back to that, but she's also taken that a lot further with a lot of designs that I find very interesting and original. I love the Bee and Honey, the Nurtured, the Weekender. There's a lot of things that I could see myself wearing. So pretty pleased with this, and just very excited to follow Andrea Mowry and see what she releases in the future. This is really lovely. So yeah, a very enjoyable knit. It's going very fast. I'm using 5mm needles because I'm a tight knitter, and anything that is a kind of 18 stitch gauge I find goes just a whole lot faster than anything tighter, basically. Yeah, of course it does. That goes without saying. And yeah, it's just very enjoyable. And honestly, this entire bag contains all the yarn I will be ever needing for this sweater, so that's pretty neat too. I just love that with Holstein. It's so compact, light, and it doesn't have to be Holst. Like Uppingham yarn's got the exact same yarn, same with Trollen wools. You got JC Rennie, you got Beaches and Boucher pronunciation, and Magazine Duet and Molson Amour. There's lots of yarns that are the same or similar that are all really good. And I mean, I think Roma Lammul is comparable as well. I would love to use that more, see what that's like held double. That would be amazing. I think if you want to do Kuskofta again, returning to that, I think if I was going to do a second one, I would probably use a lot lighter yarn, because while I wanted a heavy cardigan made in Peer Gynt by Somnes, I would also love to have a lighter one, and I think I would have made that using something like JC Rennie or Holst Super Soft held double, or Roma Lammul if you really wanted to be Norwegian yarn, then holding the lamb's wool from Roma double would be amazing. So, and more stickable than Peer Gynt. I really appreciate the comments I got on the slightly informal Kuskofta talk through video. I call it talk through instead of walk through, because I'm not really doing anything, because it's really hard to actually demonstrate hands-on things on my mother's kitchen table while she's out for a couple of minutes walking the dogs, right? It's not the easiest setup, but I managed to explain things in a slightly more visual way than I could in the pattern. So I really hope that helped you guys out, and it seems like it did, and it gave a lot of people the courage to want to cast it on, and that was the exact intent. While I was a bit afraid that it would make a lot of people feel like it was too overwhelming and too much and a bit scary after seeing the video, it seemed to have had the desired effect of wanting people to have a go at it. So that is really good to know. So I look forward to having the cow for that. I will get around to open threads and stuff soon, so yeah, hopefully by the time this video is up I will have done all of those things. I really need to get back into my admin shoes again, you know. That's not a phrase, but whatever. As for acquisitions, this is not going to be a very long segment either. I just forgot to mention this beautiful item that I received in Edinburgh Yarn Festival in the last episode. I don't know why I had it in my hands, it just didn't get mentioned, I don't think. But this was given to me by the lovely Kamibornia couple, Sophia and Dennis. They are absolutely lovely people. They have a stellar YouTube channel called Kamibornia. And they gave me this. This is a pin and stitch markers. And it's made by fellow Southern Trøndelag or Trondheim arguably, Patricia. She's an American living in Trøndelag, but she is very much all about the Norwegian colourwork and yarn and cyber mittens, and she makes mitten blockers and sock blockers, but she's also made these wooden pins and stitch markers. And there's also the Kamibornia button. So this is kind of the thing, if you can read that. Yeah. So I was just really grateful for that. This is like proper handcraft here. It says things like love and play and love and play even. So there. So thank you. I just felt awful for not mentioning that on the last episode. It was so lovely to meet you guys. So lovely for you to give me this thing, and also thank you so much to Patricia, who wasn't there, but sort of in spirit. The other acquisition I don't have much to say about. I just was browsing Amazon and I found this stitch dictionary that had good reviews. I know nothing about it, but being a designer you can have to collect these things, so I just got one. That's all I have to say. But you know, I show you guys all the stuff that I buy that's related to knitting, just to, you know, beef up the episode a little bit. The one thing I actually never show you guys when I buy is knitting needles. I just don't think it's very interesting. I have made videos talking about what needles I prefer and how I organize them, and the fact that I'm adding one more 4mm 80cm circular from Chargu into my stash. I don't think it's going to interest anyone, so I just never do that. But if anyone thought I was like being super prudent about buying needles, I'm not. Needles are my loophole. Needles is like, oh, I am just a couple of pounds away from my loyalty punch card at Leap. Wonder if I just buy one circular needle. So I have two full loyalty cards right now. Oh dear. So I seem to find myself having run out of content, and I thought, you know what, back in February I think I had put up a questions box on Instagram, and I was reading out the questions on the podcast and answering them as they came in, but they kept coming in after I'd stopped recording, and so they're still on here, so I might as well. So I thought I'd just start from the latest question that came in and to go from there. So if you ask questions like way back in February, I'm answering them now. How about that? So yeah, if there's anything else that you were here for except questions, then that's kind of finished. I'm just gonna answer questions now, and then we will wrap things up. It just seemed like an awful shame to like quit now that the light is beautiful, I have time to record, so I'm gonna answer questions. Do you make liners for any of your Selby mittens? So I assume that liners means that she means lining, so an inside that essentially replicates the outside, but it's just stockinette. And no, it's not commonly done traditionally in Norway for colorwork mittens. I'm not going to say it's never been done. It's probably someone who's going to tell me, oh, we used to do that. It's not commonly done, and I know a lot of people who are new to stranded colorwork find it super intimidating that there will be all these strands on the inside of the mitten, and people who have been making these mittens for years and years and generations have no idea why are people getting so hung up on this. Why is there problem with the strands? And I don't know if that's what this person was referring to, but I thought I would address that, because a lot of people get really hung up on this idea that there will be strands on the inside of the work, and oh, you should catch the strands a lot, and I'm like, no, chill. If you're using the kind of yarn, roughly same category of yarns that are sticky and good for colorwork, it will kind of just all stick together. Like, it's not going to, your fingers aren't going to catch on it. First of all, when you put on mittens, your fingers not going to be all over the place. You're probably going to like have them fairly like put together. So you can do lining, but I wouldn't worry about lining because of the strands, because of the floats. And I want to relate it to that, address this concern a lot of people have with catching floats. And I've had people who are relatively new to colorwork come up to me and say, oh, I'm a very bad colorwork knitter because I never catch my floats. And I'm like, catching floats has got nothing to do with being good or bad. It's not a rule. Nobody says that you should or shouldn't. It is completely arbitrary and up to you. Some people never catch their floats. Some people catch their floats a lot. The only thing I will say is that catching your floats a lot is sometimes not always desirable. Sometimes it can be. Sometimes it's part of the effect you want. But more often than not, it will make things tighter. It will make floats show on the outside. Because you're essentially wrapping your other yarn around the yarn you're trying to hide, and so that makes it more likely to show. If you want to catch a float and you don't want it to show, you have to make sure that you're not catching the float on 2 consecutive rows at the same place. So if you were knitting 3 stitches, catching a float and knitting the rest of the stitches, and the next row knit 4 stitches and catch the float and then knit the rest, right? Make sure you're not doing it in the exact same place on the 2 consecutive rows. But it's fine if you don't want to catch floats, if you're fine with the floats just being there on the back. Personally, I will catch any floats that span more than 5 stitches. It's completely arbitrary. There's no rule that you should. It's just, for me personally, I find that easier to manage. I find it easier to manage the length of the floats relative to the number of stitches I have, so that they're not too long, not too short. But you don't have to. I think people need to really listen to their own hearts when it comes to these things, you know. Just find a way that works for you. This is always going to be my mantra on knitting. Find a way that works for you. I don't know all the things, and I am not here to tell you what to do. Which was not the question, but I thought I would say it because it's been on my heart. I probably said it before. You are very productive. Got any advice for becoming a more productive knitter? Procrastinate a lot. Don't do the stuff you're supposed to do. Don't sleep. Don't eat. Don't mind your personal hygiene. I didn't say that. But on a more serious note, If you're sitting and if you're idle, if you're watching TV, knit. Never sit and not knit. If you're sitting doing nothing, make sure you're knitting instead of doing nothing. That is how I do it. I never sit and not do anything with my body, with my hands, ever. The only time I am still and not using my hands for knitting is if I'm typing or sleeping or in the toilet. Don't knit in the toilet, that's gross. Don't knit in the shower either, but then you're doing something, you know. So, just like if you're on public transit, for instance, if that's something you do, that's the place to knit. If you are sat watching TV, YouTube videos, that's time to knit. If you're waiting for your kettle to boil, get some stitches in. If you're hanging out with friends, bring some stock in that. They can handle you knit. If they can't, then it's time they get to know the real you. Seriously, I just knit all the time. This is probably also how I ended up with so many projects, but I also make sure that the projects I bring are not projects that will come in the way of the conversation, that people don't feel like I am prioritizing the knitting over them. Also, I don't hang out with people that much, so that helps. I don't have children, right? I don't have that many duties. I work from home. I have a lot of luxury there as well that other people do not have. I have more time that I could spend on knitting. I am awful at procrastinating and I spend more time on knitting sometimes than I should. So, you know, it's not like I am, again, model behavior here. I don't know that it's a goal to knit as much as I do. If that becomes a problem in your life, I'm just coming up with suggestions where you could potentially fit it into your life, which may be very different from mine. And I am not here to represent every potential life out there. Goodness me, I couldn't possibly imagine. So taking all that into account, just saying what I do. If I'm sitting, I'm knitting. What do you use to remove pill on garments? I have a couple of answers to this. First of all, I don't use that many garments made with yarn that tends to pill. I mean, all yarns pill a lot, but there are yarns that pill more than others. I tend not to use the ones that pill the most. Superwash pills a lot. I don't use that much superwash. Kashmir pills a lot. Marina pills a lot. Loose knit stuff pills a lot. If you want things to not pill, choose patterns with tighter gauges. I know a lot of garments coming out nowadays are superwash yarn patterns. They use fingering weight superwash yarn at the 22 stitch gauge. That is awfully loose for a superwash fingering weight yarn. I'm not saying it's wrong, but when you do that, expect it to pill. It will pill. Loosely plied or not at all plied yarns will pill more. You didn't ask me how to avoid pills. I'm just saying these are things that will increase the chances, and I tend not to use things like that increases the chances, but it happens. Like Magnolia, it's made in fenil. Fenil doesn't tend to pill, but if you knit, the looser you knit it, the more likely it is to pill. So this one actually has gotten quite a few pills, given actually I haven't worn it that much. You can see along the sleeve here, we're getting quite a number of pills. I wonder if it's a combination with me knitting fenil looser than I've ever done before, and the fact that they've started to put in lamb's wool into their yarn. And there's a general rule that says that the softer the yarn, the more likely it is to pill. What do? I'm a monster, what can I say? This is inconvenient. It could actually damage the garment sometimes. It depends. Fenil has a way of producing pills that are that easy to remove. But different fibers are different. Like I would never remove pills this way with, say, a Folklore Merino or a Kashmir, because the way they pill, it's like the whole fabric is just coming off. It feels like it doesn't really, but it sort of gives the impression. For that I would use a Kashmir comb. I know a lot of people use things like gleaners and stuff. They are not cheap, and they tend to come with these mesh combs, right? And that's the exact same thing as a Kashmir comb. And a Kashmir comb can be a couple of pounds. It can be £1 even. I got mine from Holst actually, but I know Prim do them. Lots of corner shops will be selling these Kashmir combs. I always carry mine in my Notions pouch, which I don't know where you can get, so don't know. It used to say Whole Super Soft on here, but I guess it doesn't anymore. And this is the kind of mesh that I'm talking about. If you can see that. Yeah? So anything that has this sort of kind of I don't know if this is metal or plastic, but it's like this mesh thing. So what you do, get your garment, whatever, I don't know what surface you should keep it on. I'm just holding it up for you guys now so you can see. And just kind of use that on the thing. And it's a lot smoother already. I mean, this is a terrible demonstration, but that's essentially how they work. And they tend to get a bit of a fluff cover on the mesh, and you just take that off. It's like, it looks like a dust bunny. I'm all for solutions that don't cost the world, because you're really just looking to depill, and I don't get where I should cash out on this massive tool from some kind of TV shop thing when I can just use this little item. So that's what I do. It works, but I also tend to just avoid things that pill in the first place, and I'm also quite frankly not that fussy if things have pilled. It's wool. I mean, I don't always care. How do you decide what projects to start? Buy the pattern first or the yarn first? I personally think that the golden standard is to buy the pattern first. But you've all seen my stash, I mean bits of it anyway, you've seen lots of yarn coming in here, and we all know it stands to reason that I should probably start with the yarn because I shouldn't be buying more yarn, and that's all true. Should. Don't like the word should, but you kind of know where I'm going with this. At some point I have to start with the yarn because I've got so much yarn is what I'm trying to say. And so I think it's best to start with the pattern and buy yarn that is suitable for the pattern. Not necessarily the recommended yarn, but probably. But it's good to substitute as well, and it's a good skill. I do often have to work the other way around, and I will look at the yarn and I will look for patterns that is suitable for it. Sometimes a pattern will just come to me and I'm like, oh, do I have yarn for that? Is there any yarn I could use? Like when I wanted to do Woodwardia, I didn't have enough Skillet yarn for that. I just used up my last skein on a hat, so I could buy more, but then I was like, I have a sweater quantity of worsted weight yarn from Canada that I could use. It's not even for me. I'm not going to care. That's not the recommended yarn. So let's just use that. And often I will compare the properties of the recommended yarn versus what I want to use. So first big factor is superwash versus not. I'm not afraid of substituting one for the other, but you have to be aware of the consequences. Yes. Superwash yarns will drape a lot, so they will have a row gauge where they will require fewer rows to get a certain length. Non-superwash tends to actually pull up a bit and become so that you need more rows to work a certain length. This will affect how many meters of yarn you might need, and it will affect, well, actual row gauge. So if there's any portion, any section of the pattern that actually relies on row gauge that you find difficult or even impossible to modify for, you might want to stick to the recommended quality of yarn, superwash or not. Same goes with weight. If you have a thinner yarn, it will give you probably a more shallow a row gauge that needs more rows to make a certain amount of length. If you have a thicker yarn, you may need fewer rows to make that same length. So again, if you change the weight of yarn, this is something to consider. Are you able to put in more rows if you need to, or if it's not possible, maybe you should go and look for a more similar yarn when you substitute. Same thing goes for fiber. If you're substituting a wool for a alpaca the other way around, again, alpaca tends to require fewer rows to make a certain length. Wool tends to require more rows for a certain length. So row gauge is a big factor there. I think stitch gauge you can achieve pretty much anything as long as you choose the right needle size. So for that, if the pattern doesn't rely on row gauge, which I kind of feel that people should try to rely as little on row gauge as possible, although I acknowledge it's not always possible, because it's very hard to modify row gauge, basically. So where was I going with this? So yeah, I think if row gauge is out of the question, you can go pretty wild and you could choose lots of different yarns and just make sure you get stitch gauge. And that you do with just changing needle size until you at least get close enough. I talk a lot about gauge here. I like gauge. I want to, as a side note to that, to say something that I have said before, but it seems to come up a lot, and that is people going, oh, I know you care about gauge, Haley, but I didn't swatch. I'm like, I don't swatch. People need to stop confusing gauge and swatching. They're not the same thing. People call swatches gauge swatches. That doesn't mean that gauge is swatch. People genuinely say, I didn't do gauge. I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense, that sentence. Do gauge. Gauge is a weird word. I like the word that we have in Norwegian. It's strikkefasthet. And it translates to knitting tension or knitting firmness or knitting density, and it makes so much more sense in that way. It means the same thing as gauge in the end, but it's just a little bit more literal, and I think that would have helped if we had a similar term. We talk about tension a lot, but tension seems to refer more to our individual tension that influences gauge, whereas gauge in the end is the number of stitches per the given measurement, which is usually 4 inches or 10 centimeters. I hate my voice right now. I hate it so much. So I just really want to ask you guys to shake off this notion that gauge has got anything to do with swatches. Swatching is just a means to make sure you get gauge, that you have practiced the texture, that you like the colors you want to use together. Things like that. That's what a swatch is. A swatch is just a test item for your product, so that you know how things will look before you start. It can be for gauge, it can be for other things, but gauge and swatch in and of itself is not the same thing. So when I talk about gauge, I don't care about how correct you are. I don't care how accurate you are, if you're doing it right, if you got the right gauge. I don't care. I'm not the gauge police. I say that a lot, and what I mean by that is, if you're knitting a garment to a different gauge than the pattern says, I'm not here to arrest you. I'm just saying, beware. Beware of what gauge you got. If you're knitting a 18 stitch pattern, but you got 20 stitches to 10 centimeters or 4 inches, as long as you know that that will make it a smaller fit, a tighter fit. Maybe that's what you wanted. Maybe you wanted a tighter fabric. There's nothing that says that you need to get gauge. I'm not saying you need to get gauge. I'm just saying make sure you know what gauge you're getting. Make sure you understand what gauge means. And I think when I hear these things being said, I worry that people don't know what gauge means. It just means the size of your stitch. Stitch gauge refers to the width of your stitch. Row gauge refers to the height or length of your stitch. That is essentially it. That's where you measure the number of rows per measurement, why it's called row gauge. That's why you measure the number of stitches, the stitch gauge, to get the width. And why it determines the length and width of your garment. And why it matters even if you're making a shawl, because a shawl is not supposed to fit any of your measurements, but it will still decide if, or determine if your shawl becomes bigger or smaller than the sample in the pattern. I feel like I repeated myself a lot, but I want people to understand these things because it's empowering to you if you do. And I'm all about empowering knitters. You know, I want you guys to know how to fish rather than just giving you fish, you know what I mean? Anyway, more questions. Oh, I'm hungry. I just ate a lot. I ate a whole box of liver pate. By the way, thank you, Anna and Christina. That was really nice. By the way, this is tradition. I answer questions, but I don't answer the question I get. I just get inspired and I rant. Most durable jumper yarn, ideally DK or worsted. I wish I could tell you a yarn that you could get, because I would say Blacker yarn Cornish tin 2 that I made my Syria cardigan in is seriously the most durable thing I've ever made. It blows my mind. It doesn't pill. I wore this thing so much. It's got a beautiful fit. It doesn't drape just a little bit in a nice way. It's amazing. It's got great stitch definition. I adore it. But they don't make it. It was a birthday yarn. It was limited. And it's amazing and it holds up so well. So I'm very curious if any of you guys are familiar with Blacker yarns, if they do similar yarns still as a regular production that behaves similarly. I'd be very interested to hear, because Cornish tin has held up remarkably well. It doesn't look worn. It hasn't pilled. It's really durable. Aside from that, I'm gonna kind of say that DK and worsted weight yarns, provided they have 2 or more plies, are pretty durable regardless. I find them anyway, because they're thicker. I think trås or 3-ply yarn from Roma, that's a very durable yarn. It hurts when I try to break it with my hands, which is usually my litmus test of a durable yarn. Peer Gynt is durable. I think Embla by Hillesvåg are pretty durable. I mean, I say that with limited experience, just trying to come up with stuff. A lot of the yarns I recommended for kosekofta are very durable, except for Holst. Holst is not very strong. When you knit it, obviously, and your two strands together, it will be quite durable, but if you just have the yarn, you can just, with a bit of force, pull it apart. It's not a strong yarn because it's really fine. So that's why I think that proper DK and worsted yarns are stronger, because they're thicker. And that would exclude single plies and loosely plied yarns. Someone asked me to do a podcast about favorite yarn and designers and places to knit. I feel like that's what I do all the time though. Isn't that what this is? I don't know. Maybe that's an idea for future, but I mean, I always talk about that. It's, yeah. I'll keep doing that. What are your favorite needles for fingering weight, colorwork, socks and mittens? Chargu, fixed Chargu needles all the way. The ones with the red cable. 80 centimeter, magically. Yeah. Honestly, since I started using those on mittens and socks, I've never gone back. I used, from my personal tension, 2.5 for socks, 2.75 for colorwork socks, and 3mm for colorwork mittens. Because that gives me the gauge I want. I don't know why it's different, but... Well, I know why it's different for socks, because stockinette usually requires the next needle size down to colorwork. So, for me anyway. It's individual. It's all individual. It's all relative. You can learn nothing here. Sorry. Why are you studying in England? Why not Norway? I have no idea. It was a very bad idea because it's really expensive here and it's free in Norway. But I needed to get out. I did not choose to study here just for the sake of studying here. I had no big sort of intelligent thought behind it. I just needed to get out of Norway for reasons I'm not. And it's really changed me. It's been a really good change for me. It's been really hard as well. But I needed to get out and on my own and be out in the world, see the world. Norway can be so insular sometimes. Like, it helps to live in a city, but really when you live in a world metropole like London, you really get to see the world and all the different people in it, and you gain so much understanding of it. And I wouldn't have been without it for the world. But for the sake of studying, I could have studied in Norway. That would have been fine. It would have been me being in a lot less debt than I am now. Tuition fees here are crazy, and they started going crazy the year I started. So in hindsight though, it was a good call, because this is a lot more of an international research area. I could easily meet the people who are the leading names in the research areas that I'm interested in. You could go to talks about them. They will come to London. So it gets more international, which is always good for your resume. It helps with English, which is always good. Makes you employable, stuff like that. But I didn't choose London for the sake of studying, although I learned after having started here that it was a lot more of a helpful student environment. I think the Norwegian student environment is very much of a you're on your own. They have this ansvar for egen læring mantra, which means you have responsibility to learn, which is really good, and I agree, and I think we could use some of that here in London, because students don't take any responsibility sometimes, and it feels really exhausting that they will be even upset with a lecturer when really they should have gone to the library themselves. Like, it can get really ridiculous. I think it's because of the tuition fees, to be honest. I'm gonna go on my soapbox for a bit now. The high tuition fees are making students behave like customers, and they expect to be spoon-fed rather than taking charge of their own learning process. But on the flip side, I got really upset as a student in Norway, where there was very little help to get, because it was always my responsibility and I didn't get to demand anything from my university. And it seemed like the two formats could use to meet someone in the middle. The UK university way could learn a lot from not being so spoon-feedy, and the Norwegian one could probably be a bit more hand-holdy just to get people through the first year at least. Those are my opinions on that. That's not why I got here, but it's certainly an advantage that I've had since moving here, that you get a lot of help. What are your plans when you're done? No idea. Not a clue. Don't even want to think about it. I mean, who knows with Brexit and everything? I don't know. Seems like Norwegians are getting the better end of the deal. It doesn't surprise me. We're a pretty rich, privileged bunch up in the north, so we're probably going to come out with it pretty well. I don't know. Some part of me wants to keep living in London. Other parts of me wants to buy a nice flat up in Edinburgh. Some parts of me thinks Oslo would be really nice, but I'm also not super keen on being like just back in Norway again. I don't know. I've got no idea. I think I will, when I'm done, either go into a part-time job related to my PhD and see if I want to continue down that path while I continue designing, or go full-time designing. I've been toying with the idea of doing other things online than stuff to do with knitting, stuff to do with other interests of mine and other things that concern me in my life, things where I can use my PhD but not formally. There's a lot of thoughts I'm having right now. It's not ripe enough to share, but it's brewing. Should we all keep our yarn in bags like you do? It really depends on your housing quality and where you live in the world and things like that. I should wrap everything up in plastic. I should wrap that pillow, the cushion, into plastic. Everything should be in plastic. I should be in plastic, because this is an old London city flat and they are all ridden with bugs. No matter what you do, that's pretty much the destiny if you live in any non-modern accommodation in like the center of the city. I know people who live just one zone out or two that don't struggle with these things, but it's been pretty much the case for me and most people I know living centrally that the housing quality isn't brilliant. I think I got pretty lucky with this flat. It's not terrible, but there are a lot of cracks and things where you could find these silver bugs that are often in the bathrooms. There are these you know, carpet beetles that people often get. I don't know that we have them. Clothes moths is the worst. I mean, they can just come in through your window at any time and stay in some crack or crevice somewhere that and come back like a year later and attack everything. Like, you just never know. So you have to be really careful. And even like my long-standing whips, they are in project bags, but in the project bag they are in plastic bags. And it's not even that plastic is super moth proof, it's just one more layer, you know, one more layer for the moth to get through. So for me it's just for security reasons. I just want to be safe than sorry. I'm not saying anyone else should do that. If I lived in Norway I probably wouldn't need to. If I lived in a more modern flat, in a flat that maybe belonged to me, where I could actually get rid of the whole carpet and make a proper floor, you know, fill in any cracks and stuff with some silicone or something to make it a bit tighter and better insulated and keep bugs out, easier to clean, all that stuff. If I had that influence on my own home, I would, and it would reduce the chances of me ever having moths or carpet beetles or anything that would eat your yarn. So it really depends on your living situation. I think if you're at the risk of moths, if you know people in the area who have been bothered by moths, if you know that your accommodation place is old, it could be a good idea. But again, I'm not here to tell people what to do. I don't think I'm an authority on these things. I just want to be safe than sorry. The bread you made in Vlogmas looked amazing. What is your favorite thing to bake? I really do love making that bread because any toddler could make it. It looks like the most amazing artisan bread, but it's the easiest thing in the world. It's following the Jim Lale method of no knead bread. I can actually remember, I can tell you right now how to do it. I'll do that from memory. It's that easy. Get half a kilo of wheat flour and mix it up with a 1/4 teaspoon of dry yeast, just a 1/4 teaspoon, and 1.5 teaspoon of salt. Keep the yeast and salt separate, but put it with the flour, but just separate sides of the pile in the bowl. Stir it together. Just make sure the salt and yeast doesn't touch until you've stirred it all together, because the salt can deactivate the yeast. You just want to be safe there. And then you mix in 400 milliliters, that is 4 deciliters of water. Temperature doesn't really matter, whatever comes out of the tap, like just lukewarm, maybe cold, doesn't really matter. Maybe not hot, you don't want to kill the yeast. I like lukewarm, it's a good rule of thumb. And mix it in with the flour mix. and it will be really goopy, and you're gonna think this is not dough, this is goop. Good. You're doing it right. Just make sure it's stir together, no kneading, just stir it with a spoon. It goes really fast. And cover it with cling film and a towel and put it somewhere dark, not drafty. Preferably if it's warm, definitely not cold. But you don't have to keep it warm like in the oven. Just if your home is at a decent temperature, it should be fine. If you have heating in the bathroom, put it there. It doesn't really matter so much. I've just had disasters in like drafty cold London housing sometimes. Just make sure it's like somewhere where it doesn't get too cold. Okay, but it's not the normal type of dough that has to rise really quickly, because this is going to stand there for 12 to 18 hours. So you have to make sure that you are doing this 12 to 18 hours before you actually want to eat the bread, at least. And then maybe it will be ready in the morning, say, and you start to work it. So cover your worktop counter with flour and pop the dough onto it, and then fold it in with the flour. Just fold it, no kneading, just folding until it looks a bit like it's got a bit more structure. You are now supposed to let it rise for another 2.5 hours, but I don't want to wait 2.5 hours after I've woken up to eat, so I just let it rise until the oven is hot. And what I do when I heat up the oven is that I also heat up an iron skillet, or Dutch oven if you will, and it will be in the highest temperature the oven can do, usually 250 degrees Celsius. And then I will put the dough inside the skillet when it's all hot, and I will use the baking paper with the bread, because from my experience the bread dough can stick to the iron. It can be really difficult to clean later, so I put the baking paper in with it and it's usually fine. Just make sure it's not the kind that would melt and stuff, but I've never had a problem with that. And then you put it in and let it in there for 45 minutes, I think, or it's half an hour, and then the last, yeah, half an hour. The last 15 minutes you do it without the lid and 220 degrees. Take it out, let the bread cool down, cut through it, enjoy. This sounded more complicated than it is. I'm just telling you all the details I picked up as I learned it. It's easy and it's yummy, and you don't even need the whole iron skillet thing. You can just make rolls while you're, yeah, that can be easier to cut as well. So I think I'm actually back to the questions that I answered last time, and my camera battery is blinking, so I think that's time for me to wrap this up. So thank you all so much for watching this, even though the end of it got a bit more improvised than planned. That's what improvised means, Ali. So yeah, I hope you will join in on the course of the Cal. I will try to now get into the admin of all the other knit-alongs and stuff in life and PhD and whatever, and I will see you guys next time. So thank you for watching. Bye.